Dr. Bas. As Dr. Bas just mentioned, my name is Maria Medrano. I am a senior graduate recruiter here at the UTSA Graduate School, and I'm also a doctoral student in the psychology department here at UTSA. I'm glad to see you guys here. I want to welcome you. Thank you for taking the time to come to this session. And today we're going to be talking about equitable access and specifically focused on first generation students. Just want to make sure that everybody can see. Okay, just a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll talk a little bit about first generation students. So what does the population look like? What is the relationship between first generation students in higher education and access to higher education? And a lot of this information is going to be based off of undergraduate populations because there's just not a lot of research right now when it comes to first generation graduate students. I'm hoping that will change in the future. That's one of my goals. But a lot of this is going to be focused on undergraduate populations. The next thing that we'll talk about may not apply to everyone, but I am including it in here because one, it's part of the homework to earn the badge, which I'll talk about at the end, but also because we do have a few people that haven't started their graduate program. So I wanted to cover a little bit of, okay, what do first generation students look at based on qualitative research? And what are some of the other things that should be considered? Because just because first generation students are focused on three things doesn't mean they're not important, but there's just so much more to be considered when you're looking for a graduate program. A lot of research also shows that social support, especially family, is very important to student success. So I'll talk about social support, family specifically in managing expectations. Now, this is really more of the research on this has been focused on Latino students, but I still think it's important to talk about it. And I'll give you some resources that the graduate school provides. And then we'll talk about socialization and networking and how that's also important at the undergrad and graduate level for first generation students and some of the things that it's been linked to when it comes to academic success. Lastly, we'll talk about resources for funding graduate education because that's something that is not necessarily always considered by first generation students when it comes to looking for graduate programs. There's a focus on costs, but a lot of students may not be familiar with what's available to them. So I think this is important for people looking into programs and for those of you who are already in programs as well, because it's not something that you do just at the beginning. It's something that you can continue to look for as you go through your program. Then we'll cover a little bit of what the badge criteria will be. So what the homework will be in order to earn this badge, and then we'll stop the recording so we can go over any questions you may have after the presentation. All right, so I'm going to talk about the benefits of graduate education because basically the whole point of this presentation is equitable access, right? So who has access to these benefits of graduate education, which include career advancements? We do have a lot of people who come back to graduate school because they want to move up a position or because a lot of times a graduate degree is required to become licensed. So a graduate degree will open up those opportunities. Some other people come back for graduate school because it's an opportunity to keep learning, to stay up to date with practices and what is going on in research. Again, those are things that people will have access to that will make them more marketable when they're out in the workforce. Even if it's a certificate or a couple of graduate courses, that still is kind of keeping up with what's going on in the field that they're interested in. And then lastly, social mobility. And the access for this is basically something you guys are probably already familiar with, which is, of course, the higher the degree you have, the higher the salary. Research has shown that graduate degree holders make around 19% more than those with a bachelor's degree. And then just in general, having education, you are less likely to experience unemployment. So these are just a few of the things that we as students have access to. I want to also go over defining first generation students because there's several different ways that people have defined them. So in some organizations, first generation students are the first in their family to attend college. So it doesn't matter if the parents maybe started college and never finished, as long as you're the first in the family to attend college, you are a first generation student. For others, particularly in some of the programs that are government funded, such as TRIO. First generation students are defined as students whose parents or caregivers didn't earn a bachelor's degree. So in this situation, it could be that that the parents or caregivers did start maybe a bachelor's degree but never finished. So it doesn't involve a little more situations, but I think that it could be, the definition could be a little more inclusive. I know that there are students who are still lost because even though their parents may have a bachelor's degree, it could be from a foreign institution to where the parents are not really able to guide the students. So there's not a one definition of first generation students, but I think it should be a little bit more inclusive. And then lastly, first generation graduate students. As I mentioned when we started this, there isn't a ton of research on first generation graduate students. We don't know a lot about them. And so much less there's no definition for it. So when I talk about first generation graduate students through the presentation, I'm talking about students who are the first in the family to complete a graduate degree. So it could be that the parents or caregivers have a bachelor's degree, but not a master's degree or doctoral degree. And I think this is important because if your parent hasn't gone through the graduate education experience, then maybe they're just not able to guide you as much as a parent who has been through that journey. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you right now is based off undergraduate populations. So first, let's look at what does a first generation student population look like. We know first generation students, at least at the undergrad level, grad level, are more likely to come from low income households, be older, they're more likely to enroll part-time and have dependents. And what some of the data has shown is that all of these things, all of these barriers together can have negative additive effects. So a person who is low income, is enrolled part-time, and is older is less likely to complete a degree in comparison to somebody who's not. So that's just what we know. And that's what my guess is that graduate students look something similar to this. Another thing to note about first generation undergraduate students is that, as you can see, there's a pretty big range when we're talking about what the prevalence is. So undergraduate students make up around 24 to 56% of students. I personally think that range is large because, again, there's no specific definition for first generation. A few more information about first generation graduate students. 44% identify as underrepresented minorities. Only 29% of first generation students go on to enroll in a master's program, and only 4% go on to enroll in a professional program. So we need to do a little bit better there when it comes to access to graduate programs. And only 16% of doctoral students actually that graduate are first generation students. So what can we do to help? I think what we can do is, if you know a first generation graduate student looking into graduate school, or if you are one and you're able to assist somebody through this process, the first thing is going over how to select a graduate program. So some of the things that first generation students look at are proximity to family obligations, and cost. And like I said when we started, these are all important, but those shouldn't be the only deciding factors when it comes to choosing a graduate program. Some other things to consider are overall generally fit. Is this a good fit for me? Campus location and culture. Do you see yourself living in that city or in that town for the time of being in the graduate program? And are you comfortable with the campus culture? I hope I don't change anybody's minds here for those of you who are already in a graduate program, but something to consider for those of you who haven't chosen one, or for those of you who are advocates and helping first generation students make this huge decision. Faculty members are going to be also an important factor when deciding, and not necessarily what kind of faculty are there, but looking at what the faculty are doing, what kind of research are they conducting, what kind of fields are they focused on. And I think this is mainly because you want to make sure that there's somebody there to guide you through the process of going through graduate school. And faculty, as you will see later, play a pretty big role. Does the program align with your career goals? So if you focus on these three things, am I close to my family? Can I still, complete my family obligations and cost? Sometimes a lot of students will forget about, okay, does this university even offer something that matches what I want to do in the future? So that's something that shouldn't limit which program is selected. And then of course, looking at how you will balance graduate school life and life, right? So one of the main things when I talk to students is looking at how many, are you ready to take this full course load? You're going to start gradually. So planning ahead what your semester will look like. And then of course, funding resources. What does the program have to offer? If there's nothing, let's say you're looking at a master's degree, how can I find funding resources to cover the cost? The next thing that's really important when it comes to first generation students specifically is a social support network, which is made up of family, mentors, friends, classmates, peers, and all of these are really important for graduate student success. So what can we do to help first generation graduate students who maybe have family members that don't understand what the journey is like, what the process is like, and why students are not able to spend as much time with family members? There is some research that shows that first generation graduate students do feel guilty sometimes for not being able to spend time with family. And I think one of the most important things that has to be done is give the family a semester at a glance. Once the student knows what the semester will look like, I think it's a good idea to sit down with those who are close to you so you can explain, these are going to be my busy times, midterms, finals. So that way you can manage those expectations from them. And that kind of leads to open conversations in advance. If you're already in school, I think throughout the process, it's also important to have those open conversations. One thing that I will recommend is attending a family orientation that we offer here at the UTSA Graduate School. For those of you looking into programs, if you're admitted into UTSA, there is that option for your family to attend an orientation. For those of you who are already in programs, there's a recorded session on our YouTube page that your family can go back and look at. So I think that's going to be a good resource for them. Things to remember and remind your family of is that graduate school is temporary. There's an end date. The goal is to get out of graduate school and go on and complete your degree. So I think it's a good reminder that it's not always going to be that you're going to be tight on time. And then of course, using family as a social outlet is important as well. Sometimes you want to forget about school for a little bit. And I think that's also going to be very important. So there is some research that shows that family can kind of pull you back, but I think if you use them as a social outlet, that can be kind of, that can make up for those findings. Socialization and networking are also very important. I think just in general, I know that I've done a lot of research with first generation students, but just in general, socializing and networking with colleagues, faculty, and mentors is going to be important. Levels of socialization have been associated with program experience, whether you actually continue the program and you complete, because if you're having a bad experience and you're not maybe feeling like you fit into the program, then a lot of times students will stop the program and just not finish. So that interaction with peers and faculty members is going to be important in order to continue the part and complete the program. And then some students see this as an opportunity for professional development. So talking to your faculty member and maybe networking at a conference or something like that is definitely an opportunity for professional development, which then kind of comes back and contributes to graduate student success. For first generation students specifically, socialization is important because students have reported that one of the factors that contributes to their success is that they like to learn from more experienced graduate students. So if you are a more experienced graduate student right now, maybe reaching out to those who are just starting the program. It also helps to feel as part of a graduate student community. Research shows that first-generation students benefit from being part of a community, not only within your program, but within the entire graduate school. So people from other disciplines, it's important to socialize with them as well. And again, these are all contributing factors to academic success for first-generation graduate students. So faculty play a huge role in this when they not only support the student at an academic level, which is pretty much what's already expected, but also at a professional level. And all of this contributes as the student transitions from student to a professional. All of this, again, has been related to success, research productivity, and graduation rates. All right, so this is the last piece that I thought was important to cover for graduate education, just because not a lot of first generation students know to look for funding. So I'm just going to cover a few types of funding that are available to students. And this is going to be kind of brief because a lot of these are focused on within the program. So a lot of times it's a matter of, again, socialization, right? Reaching out to faculty within the department that can help you get or understand what the process is for getting any of these types of funding. But these include teaching or research assistantships, which usually require that you either teach or work in a lab and typically cover the full program tuition as well as stipends. Same things for fellowships, but these are merit-based and these can be internal or external. And they're very similar to grants. I know that our graduate school offers a lot of information, especially with grants by the National Science Foundation. So it's important to look for those, not only when you fill out your financial aid FAFSA, but also just kind of when you're researching how to fund your graduate education. There's going to be a lot of opportunities there. Once you find those opportunities, you do have to prepare for them, right? So it could involve multiple applications, a lot of research into what is being offered and whether you qualify for it. And once you find what you want to apply for or what you think you can get some funding from, I think what's helpful is talking to faculty and talking to other graduate students. That socialization part is coming back again, right? It's important. So it's important to see, okay, what have more experienced graduate students done to get this funding and how can they help me? On the other hand, if you are a more experienced graduate student, reaching out to others to see how you can benefit and contribute to other student success. All right, so that's what I have for the actual presentation. In order to earn the badge, it is required that you submit a maximum 250-word reflection paper where you cover what is the process of effectively researching and choosing a graduate program. So if you're already in a graduate program, you can talk about what you did when you were looking into it, or you can always go over what you would do differently. Also discussing the importance of social support from either faculty or other students or family and how that kind of ties back to academic success. And then lastly, the types of funding opportunities that are available, just so that way in the future, when you're looking for something, you can come back and reference this. All right, well, that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to, I think, type them in the chat and we can go over that. Also, if you're a current student and you have any tips, feel free to also offer that to those who are looking into programs.